The military, a noble profession that receives respect for the significant contributions they make to society. Yet, even in the wildest imaginations of the maddest among us, no one could envision a military person ready to discard all dignity, tarnish their honor and image, to become a deranged murderer that shocked Canadian history. The main character in this story is a 47-year-old man named Russell Williams, known as a colonel and a renowned pilot in the Canadian Armed Forces. He was trusted with responsibilities in major events, involving many important political figures, including flying airplanes carrying the Queen of England and the Prime Minister of Canada, and even overthrowing all those achievements with heinous crimes. Russell Williams was born in Proms, Gulf, England, before immigrating with his family to live in Canada. Russell witnessed his parents' divorce when he was just 6 years old. His mother then remarried a close neighbor and they moved again. Despite growing up deprived of love from his father, Russell still showed the qualities of a successful individual by excelling at school. He then got admitted to a prestigious university in Toronto. In 1987, at the age of 27, Russell Williams joined the Canadian Armed Forces with great ambitions, ready to contribute his youth to national security. Recognizing Russell's potential, his commanders trusted him and enrolled him in the Canadian Air Force's Flight Training School, where he served as an instructor from 1990 to 1991. By the age of 31, Russell Williams began working at Choaton Air Force Base near Ottawa, the capital of Canada, before becoming the commander of that base in 2009. In the following years, Russell's career saw significant advancements. He held many important roles within the Canadian Air Force, often being assigned to pilot aircraft carrying politicians and foreign diplomats. Russell was considered a model military officer throughout his 23-year career. He even flew Queen Elizabeth II and the Duke of Edinburgh, the Governor-General of Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, and many other officials around in the VIP aircraft of the Canadian Air Force. He had a noble career that many admired. Russell was also a fortunate man when he married his wife Elizabeth, a woman working in health care as the director of the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada. The couple was envied by many for their luxurious and fulfilled life. After many years of hard work, they purchased a lavish home in Ottawa in 2004 and shortly thereafter bought a vacation home in the suburbs of Tweed, only a 2.5-hour drive away. They often spent time there on weekends or when free, enjoying a peaceful life away from the hustle and bustle of the crowded city. Russell often took advantage of his leave days to go there alone without his wife and would stay for a few days. However, it was here that a sick habit was formed, which later developed into an unforgivable crime. In 2007, Russell's criminal activities began to emerge. He secretly monitored young women living around his area, noting their daily routines when they went to work or returned home, and took advantage of the moments their houses were empty to secretly break in and indulge in his perverse pleasures. But what exactly was this perverse pleasure? As mentioned, Russell is a very powerful man, has the appearance of a poised man, trustworthy, and especially with a lot to lose. To avoid risking your dream life, he must be extremely careful, for every action must not leave any traces and, most importantly, undetectable. So he broke into the girls' houses with the purpose of stealing women's underwear and adult toys. Russell's first victim was a little girl, only 12 years old. He snuck in when no one was there. Get a pair of pink panties and started spinning with it. Even more crazy, Russell even tried it on and took pictures filming. For the next 3 hours he finally agreed to leave. Of course, all traces of my break-in were erased carefully so as not to be discovered. After the first successful mission, Russell continued his depraved behavior further many more times. With exactly the same method, he broke into many different houses. Some places were even visited by him many times. Russell continued to blatantly act in defiance of the law. Gradually, the demon in his heart grew bigger and bigger. Devour. The man's morality was once highly admired and respected. November 2009, Russell drove from his home in Greece to Bellevue residential area 30 minutes away. He sat in the car quietly observing a house until the owner of this place, a woman named Anne, left there. Then he started to act. With my experience, Russell easily broke the lock to open the door and step inside. He went straight to Anne's bedroom on the second floor, searched everywhere, and finally found what I needed: Anne's underwear and toys. Not only that, Russell also accessed the victim's computer to steal movie videos adults are stored in it. After finishing work, Russell happily left here. This time, he also left an anonymous letter to threaten the enemy, something that has never been possible before. When writing on the computer, "Go ahead and call the police to arrest me. I will expose all these shameful things to everyone, and let's see then how you could still have the face to live." These words of Russell show that his behavior has become bolder than before. It's no longer just about illegally entering homes and stealing property, but it has evolved into threatening acts that endanger the physical, mental, and even the lives of others. Anne got home late at night after a fun outing with a friend. She was chilled to the bone when she saw that the door had been broken into. Gathering all her courage, Anne went around the house to look for the perpetrator, but he had long fled. Upon reaching her bedroom, she was horrified to see everything tossed around and in disarray. She was even more terrified when she received a threat from the mysterious intruder. Anne dared not call the police, but feeling unsafe, she went to stay temporarily with a friend that night. However, Anne did not know that this too was part of Russell's cunning plan. Her fleeing to another place had made her home an easier target. Russell, understanding this psychology, casually returned there to continue his vile acts with the underwear. He stripped off his clothes, put on Anne's, and nonchalantly posed in front of the mirror, filming and taking pictures for hours without fear. When Anne unexpectedly returned a few days later, it was all too late. Russell had already obtained what he wanted, and Anne could not report him to anyone. Just a few days after Anne's incident, Jane's turn is 21 years old, a single mother living with her son in Tweed, the same neighborhood where Russell lives. Unlucky enough to become the next victim targeted by him, Russell's crimes have increased to a new level this time. He doesn't need to wait until people have left the house, but blatantly broke in even when someone was there. Russell tried to sneak and skillfully break into the castle work without making any noise to avoid being recognized by Jane, because the two of them live very close to each other's houses. He wore a mask to hide his identity. Afterward, Russell sat quietly waiting for his prey in the bedroom. Jane had just put her son to bed at this time and returned to the room. As soon as the light was turned on, she was blindfolded and threatened by Russell. "Do what I say. If you don't keep quiet, I will kill you," Russell said, deliberately changed his voice so that Jane wouldn't recognize Ra, even though I was very scared. But Jane can only do as he asks. She did not forget to beg the criminal, "Don't do anything to harm your little son." Of course, Russell didn't come here because of the boy, but because of Jane. He sat her on the chair, tied up with rope, to make it easier to abuse. Russell then forced Jane to pose in many sexy positions, take photos and videos for 3 hours, causing the victim to panic and suffered severe psychological effects. Do you know where Russell went the next morning after committing a series of terrible actions? Thus, he returned to form photo of his highly respected Army colonel, put on Air Force uniform, wearing prestigious medals on his chest, to attend a charity event for my intelligence agency. It is accurate to say that currently Russell is leading two lives at once. By day, he is a respectable, well-liked gentleman, but as night falls, he sheds that facade to become a wolf, preying on vulnerable victims and engaging in depraved acts beyond anyone's imagination. Despite his outwardly pristine appearance, the reality is that Russell's soul has long been corrupted. 13 days after the incident above, a woman named Lori called the police to report her ordeal. She recounted that she was attacked by a mysterious man inside her own home. He knocked Lori unconscious and then tied her to the sofa, stripped her clothes off, and began his vile acts. Upon hearing this, the police connected the dots with other recent reports of assault, recognizing that all were perpetrated in the same manner by the same individual. However, at this point, all information about the perpetrator was still shrouded in darkness. All Lori could provide to the police was his voice. She suspected the assailant to be Larry John, a neighbor living nearby. Immediately, Larry faced severe criticism from the community to the extent that he dared not show his face in public. People viewed him as a pervert and looked at him with anger. Wherever Larry went, he was ostracized and verbally and even physically abused. This unfortunate innocent man was suddenly wrongfully accused, while the real culprit was still at large, untouched by the law and free from any punishment. Russell even gained the trust of the residents of Tweed because he held the rank of colonel. Therefore, everyone felt secure and did not harbor the slightest doubt about Russell, a cunning old fox who deceived everyone with his appearance and continued to secretly carry out these depraved acts. At the Air Force unit that Russell commanded, there was a female officer named Mary, 38 years old, who was quite close to him. The two had worked together on many flights, transporting leaders, where Mary was assigned the duties of a flight attendant. As her direct superior, Russell had access to all information related to Mary, from her phone number and home address to her relationships and work schedule. No detail escaped his notice, meaning that once Russell targeted Mary as his prey, he would break into her house whenever Mary was away to carry out the acts he regularly performed on other women. On a day in November 2009, Mary's life was forever changed when she discovered that her underwear was mysteriously missing from her drawer. Despite a thorough search, she couldn't find them anywhere. This incident might have seemed odd to Mary, but it wasn't serious enough for her to call the police. She thought perhaps they had been lost somewhere or blown away when hanging outside to dry. At the end of November, according to her work schedule, Mary was supposed to be on a business trip to Brazil. Seizing this opportunity to continue his actions, Russell assumed he would not be discovered. However, fate had other plans. That day, Mary unexpectedly took a day off without a prior notice. Russell came over and found her still at home. Instead of leaving to keep his secret, he daringly decided to hide in the basement with a knife in hand, ready to commit a crime. The presence of this uninvited guest disturbed Mary's pet cat, which, annoyed by the intrusion, continuously meowed to alert its owner and attract her attention. Out of curiosity, Mary went down to the basement to check, unaware that Russell was waiting there with a knife. The moment Mary turned on the light, she was completely unprepared and was struck several times on the head with a flashlight by Russell until she was unconscious. He then repeated his previous methods, wrapping duct tape around her face, tying her to a column and humiliating her while she pleaded in extreme pain. He heartlessly watched as his victim slowly died from blood loss, showing no mercy. After the victim died, he quickly cleaned up the crime scene and left as mysteriously as he had appeared. A few hours later, Mary's boyfriend came to the house because he could not contact her, only to discover in horror that Mary had been brutally murdered and was lying cold in the basement. He immediately reported the crime and the police began their investigation, but all clues had been erased. This villain devised an extremely intricate plan and did not make any mistakes. After committing the crime, Russell pretended as if nothing had happened and even had the audacity to attend Mary's funeral to mourn her and offer condolences to her family. His crocodile tears deceived everyone and successfully covered up the crime he committed. During this time, the police continued their vigorous investigation into the perpetrator who had attacked Mary. Even an amateur would know that it was not the right time to act, let alone a cunning fox like Russell. He remained inactive and returned to his normal life as a model man, always performing his job well and knowing how to take care of his small family. 2 months later, as the incident gradually settled down and few remained interested in Mary's case, the hunting ground was no longer strictly monitored by the police, paving the way for the villain Russell Williams to return to his crimes. The next victim Russell targeted was Jessica, 27 years old, who was in charge of administrative tasks supporting the operation of school buses, living in an area near Russell's town of Tweed. This area had always been his hunting ground. Russell could never forget the exhilarating feeling of tormenting his victims or performing depraved acts with their underwear. He was driven to satisfy his perverse pleasure, and who were more suitable than young women living alone? However, this time Russell's method of committing the crime changed. He no longer attacked victims in their homes, but instead kidnapped Jessica and took her to another location. The next day, on January 29, 2010, Jessica's company tried to contact her after noticing her unusual absence, but all efforts failed. They reached out to her brother for help. Upon receiving the news, he went with the police to check his sister's house, where they found no trace of her, and the house was in complete disarray, as though it had been burglarized. Notably, on the driveway leading to the garage, they found Jessica's glasses and wallet, making the situation increasingly serious. During the investigation, the police discovered 2 important details. Firstly, there were footprints of a man visible in the snow in the backyard of the house. The cold weather had frozen these tracks, making them clearly visible, and next to them were also the shoe prints of Jessica. Secondly, there were tire tracks that looked very unusual, certainly not the kind commonly produced and used in households. From these findings, it could be concluded that Jessica had been followed from afar and abducted by an unknown assailant. Immediately, a large-scale search was initiated throughout the town, with all available resources mobilized, because time was of the essence. The longer the delay, the greater the danger to Jessica's life. Even Russell's unit participated along with the local people. He played a perfect act, reassuring everyone that they would be safe because the military was there. Russell spoke publicly, stating, "Our unit will provide the necessary support. This place is protected by our Canadian Air Force. It is truly regrettable to witness such a terrible event happening." However, despite the relentless efforts, Jessica was never found. While the search was ongoing, the local police were still highly focused on the evidence collected at Jessica's house. Due to the very unique tire tracks, they immediately devised a plan. The police proceeded to blockade all exits from the town, leaving only one route open on Highway 37. Any vehicle passing through the checkpoint was required to stop for thorough inspection. On February 4, 2010, it was not difficult for the police to find it, a Nissan Pathfinder SUV. Just by sight, they could recognize its unique tires, identical to the tracks left at Jessica's house. They looked at each other in astonishment, silently congratulating themselves on successfully laying the trap, but they did not reveal their excitement outwardly, lest they alert the suspect and lose him. However, the question of who was currently driving the vehicle was paramount, and when the car window was lowered, the police were stunned to see that it was Colonel Russell Williams, a respected figure they had always held in high regard. Yet it seemed Russell did not yet understand what was happening. He said, "Can you guys check quickly for me? My son is very sick and I need to get home urgently to check on him." Faced with his urgent request, the police had no choice but to let Russell pass the checkpoint, despite their deep suspicions. They thought that might be the end of it, but the police later discovered that Russell actually did not have a son and everything he said was a lie. By February 7, 2010, Russell was finally summoned to aid in the investigation, interrogated by Jim Smith, a veteran criminal police officer from Ontario. Jim's involvement indicated the seriousness of the case, and because Russell was a military colonel, the responsibility could not be left to the local police. Sitting across from Jim in the interrogation room, Russell showed no fear. On the contrary, he was quite confident, incessantly chewing gum. However, when questioned about the similarity between the tires of his vehicle and the tracks found at the crime scene at Jessica's house, he was immediately speechless and quickly confessed. Russell spent the next 10 hours recounting to Jim the process of committing his crimes and describing the perverse desires that had crept into his soul and turned him into a murderer. On the evening of January 28, 2010, Russell secretly watched Jessica from outside her house while she was running on a treadmill in the basement. At 1 a.m. the next day, January 29, he broke into the house while Jessica was sleeping, blindfolded and gagged her and humiliated her for 3 hours. After satisfying his perverse desires, Russell dragged Jessica into his car to take her to his home in Tweed. At this point, she was still alive and pleaded for her life. Russell agreed, but in return, she had to comply with his demands, which included him raping her for the next 21 hours. After this, Russell went back on his word and mercilessly killed Jessica without any remorse. He discreetly stored her body in his garage, waiting for a moment when no one would notice to secretly bury her in a forest near Tweed. Russell explained that he decided to confess because he wanted to alleviate his own obsessions about what he had done and, more importantly, to lessen the burden on his beloved wife. After giving his statement, he left a message for his wife expressing remorse and seeking forgiveness. He also asked her to continue taking care of their pet cat, which they had been fostering for some time. Surprisingly, the case file was quickly completed in less than 24 hours, and Russell was arrested. Police searched his houses in Tweed and Ottawa, discovering numerous notes, photographs, and other evidence proving Russell Williams was the perpetrator in previous assaults. He had twice burned collections of stolen women's underwear in a vacant field near Ottawa, but the remaining evidence was sufficient to convict him, including photos of the bedrooms of 11-year-old twin girls and 87 sets of stolen underwear belonging to a young woman living alone. Additionally, his computer stored numerous files of videos depicting the rape of his victims. During the legal proceedings, it was revealed that Russell had attempted suicide in jail by trying to suffocate himself with a cardboard, but was unsuccessful. His cell was subsequently placed under special surveillance. On July 23, 2010, Russell was tried at the Bellevue Superior Court in Ontario, Canada. On October 18, 2010, at the trial in Bellevue, Colonel Russell Williams was found guilty of 2 murders, 2 sexual assaults, and 82 break-ins. The prosecution presented numerous photos William took of his victims being tortured and of himself in a highly aroused state wearing the victim's underwear. Some photos showed him in underwear with cartoon characters and others in silk underwear in a highly aroused state. The prosecution only described the contents of the tape he had made himself, opting not to show it due to its extremely violent and disturbing nature. On October 21, 2010, Russell was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murders, plus an additional 120 years for other crimes. Even after this sentence, Russell showed no remorse or apology to the victims. The court also ordered the destruction of his SUV and all records he had created, as well as hundreds of stolen underwear items. Additionally, William was fined $8,800 CAD with $100 for each criminal act to be paid into a victims support fund. When the media reported on William's case, many Canadian citizens called for his execution, a punishment that had been abolished in the country since 1976. Despite this, there is still a chance for him to be released on parole in 2035 at the age of 72. Though his criminal actions had a profound impact, sparking a serious re-evaluation of human ethics, reminding us that not all who appear decent are truly kind-hearted, as sometimes the facade they present is merely what they want us to see, while their hidden lives might hold unimaginable secrets.